Since the 1980s, cartels have dominated the world's drug trade. They now have billions of dollars. But with so many competing cartels, there's a violent drug war taking place in South and Central America. In Mexico and Colombia alone, tens of thousands of people have been killed by cartels. Some of the victims are cartel members themselves, but many of those who lost their lives were innocent people that got caught in the crossfire, in one way or another. But which of these notoriously violent groups are the worst? These are the most brutal cartels that are still active in 2023. 5. Sinaloa. The Sinaloa cartel is not only one of the biggest drug trafficking organizations the world has ever seen, it's also one of the most famous. That's all down to its leader of many years, the infamous El Chapo. It was El Chapo who established the cartel's reputation for ruthless violence. The gang was known for kidnapping, torturing, and finally murdering members of rival cartels. But it's not just their rivals they treat with that kind of brutality. If their drug couriers lose their stash, the money, or even if they just show up late, the cartel makes sure they don't live to tell the story. Anyone who stands in the way of their trade will be swiftly murdered, and they don't go lightly on their victims. Their collection of weapons came complete with a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, and it was big enough to power a small army. El Chapo was even known to carry around his own custom gold-plated AK-47. That is, until he was arrested and sentenced to life in prison in one of the most high-profile court cases in history. Mexican cartels are going through a period of rapid change at this time, with many of them fragmenting into smaller gangs. But despite this and their leader's arrest, the Sinaloa cartel is holding strong. They're still known for having insiders working for them in the police and the military, but that doesn't mean they let the government call the shots. In 2019, when El Chapo's son was arrested by security forces, they started a war. In broad daylight on public streets, the cartel clashed with the army. They made sure to set fire to several vehicles and stage a prison break too, and eventually got their way. The young gang member was freed, and the cartel remains possibly the most powerful cartel in the world. 4. Jalisco New Generation, or CJNG. We already mentioned that the cartels are fractured right now. Well, every time a cartel breaks up, the fragments turn into new cartels, who carry the same violent values as the cartel they split from. The Jalisco New Generation, often called CJNG, are the perfect example of that. They split from the Sinaloa cartel in about 2010, and now they're one of Sinaloa's most aggressive competitors. But what makes this cartel stand out is that its leader was once a police officer. He's now one of Mexico's most wanted, with a reward of $10 million for his capture. Despite their leader's roots, they're known for their violent attacks on police and security forces. Around April 2014, they murdered 5 federal officers with machine guns and grenade launchers. Then, within just weeks, they killed another 15 police officers the same way. The following month, as if they hadn't made themselves clear enough, they shot an RPG at a military helicopter. It crashed into the sea, killing 5 soldiers. They're no less violent with rival cartels. In 2019, they murdered 14 people in a rival gang's territory. But they're even more brutal when carrying out planned assassinations. They've killed dozens of state officials, including a judge and his wife, who were found in their home with about 20 bullet wounds in each of their bodies. CJNG also like to make themselves known by hanging the bodies of their murder victims from bridges for everyone to see. And according to experts, this is just the beginning. They believe the young group is about to expand even further and gain even more power, so we can only wait to find out what they do next. 3. Juarez. The Juarez cartel is one of the few criminal gangs that's actually powerful enough to rival the Sinaloa cartel, and they've been proving that since 2007. Before then, they were allies to the Sinaloa cartel, but a war started between them when the Juarez cartel decided that they were the rightful owners of 2 major drug trafficking routes. The Sinaloa cartel disagreed, and a bloody battle has been taking place ever since. The violence has added to the already unusually high murder rates in places like Chihuahua City. And actually, even without the war, the Juarez cartel had murdered thousands of people over the last few years. Ciudad Juarez was attacked the hardest, with 1,200 murders in 2018 alone. This isn't new. They've been a powerful gang since the 1980s. Their original capo became famous in 1997 when the attempt to change his appearance completely with extensive plastic surgery. He hoped this would help him escape capture. It didn't work. He died on the operating table. However, they didn't stop after his death. But taking over was a pretty dangerous job. For a time, all his successors were assassinated within just a few short years as leader of the gang. It is believed this might have contributed to the war with the Sinaloa cartel, but they're still exceptionally violent, even though they're not attempting to expand their operation as aggressively as they were a few years ago. They're most famous for chopping the heads off their rivals before mutilating their bodies and dumping them in public spaces as a warning to others. But their worst crime so far happened back in 2019. They attacked a Mormon family, killing 9 people, most of them only children. The group isn't trying to take over new territory right now, but they're still a huge threat in their regions, and they show no signs of handing power over to anyone. 2. The Gulf Cartel. The Gulf Cartel might be Mexico's oldest cartels, with some sources saying their roots dating back to at least the 1980s. Their first leader was so formidable that he became the first ever Mexican drug lord to be included in the FBI's 10 most wanted list. In other words, they set the standard for all other cartels to follow later. But they don't just deal in drugs. The powerful cartel had held trade routes as far as Europe, Africa, and Asia, instead of just South America and the US. They've been known to deal in assassinations and kidnappings worldwide too, but their violence is directed at other cartels too. In 2021, a fight broke out between the Gulf Cartel and 3 other rival gangs. It was described as people walking out onto the street and firing guns in every direction. They found the time to steal several cars while this was happening. 19 people died in the fight, but 15 of the deaths were civilians who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Their members are treated with the same kind of violence by their enemies. Back in 2013, their capo moved to the suburbs in Dallas, Texas to hide out, fearing for his life. Even all that way away, his fears came true. An assassin from a rival gang hunted him down and killed him outside his house. The most bloody war the gang has ever seen was against a group that weren't rivals. In fact, they didn't even exist until the Gulf Cartel created them. In the 1990s, the Gulf Cartel was at the height of their power. In 1996, their leader was captured and sentenced to life in prison in the USA. His successor decided it would be a good idea to increase their firepower, and he began recruiting corrupt Special Forces soldiers to create a paramilitary wing within the cartel. The US Drug Enforcement Agency said they were the most technologically advanced and capably violent of all cartel paramilitary groups. Having them backing up the Gulf Cartel sounded like a great idea at the time, and for a while, it worked, until the soldiers went rogue. When this paramilitary wing split from the Gulf Cartel, the fight was described by experts as the most violent incident in the entire history of organized crime. That's a bold claim. So where are these rogue soldiers now? Today, they've formed their own cartel under the name 1. Los Zetas. The Los Zetas cartel is probably the most violent cartel of all time. Their split from the Gulf Cartel happened in 2010, and they've been terrorizing Mexico ever since. In their first year, they took over, occupying territories in 45 different municipalities. That's more than double what their closest rivals hold to claim. How do they do it? Well, most cartels mainly use corruption to help spread their influence. Los Zetas weren't interested in that old-school organized crime approach. Instead, they used violence to make their mark, and they were shockingly good at it. It started with the clash with the Gulf Cartel when they decided to form their own gang. The fighting was so violent that it created several ghost towns in Mexico that are still empty to this day because residents are either dead or too scared to go back. But it didn't stop there. They're known for seriously high body counts whenever they stage an attack. In their first year as an independent gang, they executed 72 migrants. The next year, they attacked casinos in San Fernando and Monterrey, leaving a shocking 245 people dead. In another incident, they dumped 49 decapitated bodies along a highway in Monterrey. You've got to feel sorry for any innocent motorist who chose to drive that way at the wrong moment. The gang doesn't hesitate to kill anyone, and they've taken their operation a lot further than just drug trafficking. They'll take on any job that will earn them cash. They now trade also in assassinations and, even worse, human trafficking. And they will capture, torture, mutilate, and publicly dump the bodies of anyone that crosses them. It's pretty dangerous being in their cartel too. In just their first 5 years of operation, they lost 3 of their leaders, either because they were killed or captured. This has caused the group to weaken and split. Now it appears the Los Zetas cartel was actually split into 2 rival gangs, the Zetas Old School and the Northeast Cartel. They've also lost some territory. However, even if the cartel has split, the 2 rival gangs, if formed, are carrying on the same shocking level of violence that was started by Los Zetas. They're just as dangerous now, if not even worse. Want to know more about the world's most dangerous cartels? Then be sure to hit subscribe, and don't forget to tell us what you think in the comments.